You're listening to the Aesthetically Speaking podcast, presented by Nextech.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Aesthetically Speaking podcast, presented by Nextech. I'm Tyler Terry, your host, and we're here today live at ASPS in beautiful San Diego, live on the floor. And I'm here today with my guest. His name is Bill Walker. He is the founder and CEO of Aesthetic Brokers. Welcome, Bill. So honored to have you here.
Tyler, welcome to San Diego. You're in my backyard.
Wow, that is amazing, and I'm so jealous right off the bat.
We've got the Padres winning for you guys on purpose. Everybody's jazzed. We're going to go to the playoffs. Like, you're here. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. The Padres are in the playoffs.
They are. I saw they celebrated at Dodgers. I'm a huge Dodger fan. They celebrated on our field right after they won. I was like, that is disrespectful. Just kidding. No, they had to do it.
Ohtani made us look so bad during that series. He's making everybody in the league look bad. But
I know, 50-50, right?
Yeah, that's right, the 50-50 club. But we'll take it. Very proud baseball heritage here in San Diego. We're very excited you guys are here today.
Well, thank you. And I'll say this, knowing now that you are a Padres fan, Petco Park is definitely my favorite baseball field. And if you haven't been there and you're listening to this podcast, go schedule a time to take your family to beautiful San Diego and take them to a Padre game. Make sure that you play some wiffle ball out in center field, right?
Yes.
They have a little wiffle ball field out there,
They
then
do.
there's like a beachy area where there's sand and you're watching the game. It's so cool.
Petco Park is really a classic American ballpark. It's not a stadium, it's a park. There's a special feel to that, and we're very, very proud of that, and it's definitely a staple in the community. So I'm grateful anytime anybody in the country gets to come and experience it.
Oh, that's amazing. So let's start off with just talking a little bit about you. I'd love for you to share with our listeners your background and kind of just tell us, how you started your company.
Sure. Well, I think, when you go back to the idea and impetus for Aesthetic Brokers, it really came from my experience on the buy side of private equity-backed healthcare. I spent previous time in the acquisition mode, really going to massive scale on a DSO platform, learned a lot about what's really important to private equity funds that want to invest in healthcare practices. I also saw how much of an advantage you have when you're seeing hundreds of deals and hundreds of companies and hundreds of profit and loss statements. And usually the clinician who's the sole owner has spent the last 20, 25 years building their practice, and they're doing one deal and they're doing one transaction. And so I saw how fragmented the aesthetic space was. I recognized that it was going to be an attractive and an interesting investment for family offices and private wealth type funds to inject their capital to really help it grow. And I felt like there would be extreme value for representing the sell side for those owners to have quality advice and representation when they are thinking about preparing or actually doing a transaction. So that's how we started Aesthetic Brokers in 2023, and it's been a whirlwind since.
I bet, especially with so many new practices starting up and practices that are preparing to eventually sell their practice and they need somebody to represent. So when you're looking at the market, who is your ideal client and what is it about them where they have this pain and they need your assistance?
That's a great question. So the ideal client is the avatar is so transformative because really at their core, I think the most successful people in the aesthetic space, as far as a practitioner owner type perspective, or even the business owner who is just really passionate about aesthetics, that person's quality is entrepreneurialism. Because the entrepreneur spirit, that's very American in nature, of course, is always constantly in a growth mindset to learn. And the people that I interact with that are the most fascinating, and it drives me to realize they are so successful at what they've built in their practice, is they were entrepreneurial. Because aesthetics in and of itself, from plastic surgery all the way to hormone therapies now, it is a frontierism type mentality of finding something that's a better solution, a better result for patients. And they research, they do their homework, they really put a lot of energy and passion into figuring out what works well and what's the best result. And because they're so well educated on that, they get an uncommon result. And that's kind of where the aesthetic space has become so viable. I think the biggest pain point for those entrepreneurs that I'm speaking about is, look, I can't walk into an OR and do a procedure for a patient, right? That is not my specialty. The amount of time and energy and devotion that it takes to be good at that and be exceptional is significant. And so where I think we add a lot of value is you don't have to worry about trying to figure out, am I doing my deal, my one deal in my entire life the right way? Am I able to even manage the time commitment that it takes to do that one deal? You're talking a 20-hour-a-week type of commitment for a big practice, right? To go through a significant transaction to do it successfully. So do you have the extra 20 hours a week to run your deal? And then you have to ask yourself, gosh, can aesthetic brokers bring a competitive market to my doorstep so that I get the best deal? And I think that is what everybody wants. Buyers want the best practices, right? Sellers want the best buyer terms for both culture fit and for the monetary unlocking of their wealth. Because until somebody is willing to write that check, a practice is worth what it's worth on paper. And so that's, I think, probably a secondary result of the pain point of helping them in that process, is really helping them in advance to prepare to go to market so that they don't make mistakes at the 5-yard line. We help them clean up those mistakes at midfield so that when they get down inside the 20, they're scoring touchdowns and not field goals.
So what would you say to an aspiring entrepreneur who's getting out of a practice where they want to go and open up their own? Let's say this is very common. We have a lot of successful celebrity injectors who crush it for their med spa. And if the med spa isn't taking care of them, they decide to go and open up their own practice. You know, these 2,000 to 3,000 new med spas coming online, a lot of them aren't just startups. A lot of them are injectors starting their own practice. So what would you say to somebody that's listening right now who's like, I'm not interested in selling my practice. I want to just be in control of my destiny for the next, for the foreseeable future. What should they be doing so that when an opportunity comes knocking at their door, they don't have to wait 2 or 3 years, or they're not behind the ball and they can actually sell?
All right, let's unpack a couple of things in there. So when I hear people talk about, this is a great point you bring up. It's very poignant. The super injector, right? The celebrity injector. I tell all of my clients candidly up front is, don't get to a situation where somebody on your staff is the sole critical key pin in your organization, that if they were to walk out the door, you're completely devastated, right? You as an owner, you want to take care of your people. You pride yourself on taking care of your patients. You pride yourself on taking care of your people. All of the owners that I meet are exceptionally giving and caring to their team and their staff. And that's likely what's helped drive their success, right? And so I think the separation from that risk is, so you just never know when the avalanche is going to come, right? Sometimes you're skiing down the mountain, you think everything's great, we got pure powder, it's like a sunny day, this is gorgeous, and then you're like, there's no way my best provider would ever leave me, and the avalanche shows up, and now you're racing to shelter, and you're trying to recover. And so one of the advice points that I give is never let yourself be overly exposed in any one modality or any one provider. The second thing I would say is there are going to be people, because this is an entrepreneurial industry, that are exceptional care providers, whether the super injector or what have you. And for those people, it's a natural progression for them to want to be an owner, to want to be in charge of their own practice. And so for that provider, my advice to them is It's okay to step outside of your comfort zone and want to be an owner, but you can be an owner in multiple ways. I think one of the most fascinating ways that's been emerging over the last couple of years has been these pathway to partnerships that the private equity firms that I've seen are investing in these practices. They're putting actual equity shares in the super producer who's maybe the associate doctor, or the nurse practitioner who's a high performer, kind of D1 super athlete that can play shortstop, second base, pitch a little, play center field. They're like, this is a superhuman. And so they're investing in those people as actual owners. So I find that to be very attractive for some people, because you have this sense of ownership in the success of the company in this multiplicative future, but you don't get a lot of the headaches that maybe come with that early stage entrepreneurship. For the people that like that conventional pathway, that want to go out on their own, and they want to set up shop and go from 1 treatment room to 3 treatment rooms, and they want to negotiate the lease, and they want to do the payroll, and they want to do the accounting, and they want to negotiate the vendor contracts. All of those things you can do, and it can be a fulfilling and rewarding piece of it. The advice that I have for them is know your numbers, seek out counsel, give me a call. I will give you some free advice and coach you through the first few steps, because everybody's always paranoid. Like, I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to buy this advice and buy that advice. Look, it's beneficial to the entire industry in my mind to give people straightforward, solid advice, and it's good karma. So if you ever have a question, just ask somebody. Ask somebody who's in a position to give you some good advice, and they'll give it to you. And then once you get your feet under you, then come and talk to me, because we can help you scale faster probably, and then ultimately coach you through, if you've been around for a couple of years, coach you through that 20-yard line into the goal line. I think the last thing I'll say on the topic that you brought up is, for people thinking, I want to hold on to my practice for like a 10-year horizon, I can understand that. I think look introspectively and then extend your scan out on the horizon so that your wings are level when you're flying, and say, okay, I'm wings level. Now, I've thought about this while I'm flying straight and level. Is this really what I want? Is a 10-year? Or do I want to be successful now or in the near future at the same intensity and the same level that I would be if I were 10 years from now? And if I can get to my success story at the 10-year mark in 3 or 4 or 5 years, then you need to do it, because this is still a relatively small industry. It's $18 billion. Dentistry is $177 billion. If you think that the consolidation space and the attractiveness and all the buzz that goes around the investment strategies of these firms is going to last for a 25-year horizon, that's not realistic. And so the way to think about that is, how do I accelerate my success so that I have the choice of whether or not I want to partner with a private firm for investment, whether I have the choice to go down to 1 or 2 days a week of working, vice working 3 or 4 or 5 days a week. And so it's all about choice and giving yourself the most options on the buffet. But at the end of the day, the last couple of years, what it's taught investors is operational excellence. And so what I think you'll see as a byproduct of that is the support, the emphasis on support from these investment firms is going to rest on the operational excellence of how can we provide more support, how do we get a better alignment between the people that are driving the revenues in the door and driving the outcomes for the patients. And that in and of itself, I think, is going to bifurcate even more, and you're going to see more investment in the technologies that are going to drive better results for patients.
So when we talk about this operational excellence, I'm going to relate this to when you're working with the provider that owns the practice. A lot of times the owner of the practice is also the provider, right? And so when you're working with that individual, how do you shift their mindset from working in the business to working on the business?
I think the alignment comes for them, and the comfortability comes through repetition of conversation. I can say something to a client, and when you hear something the first time, you capture a little bit of it. You say it the second time, they capture a little bit more. Eventually, that's why it's so important to form this relationship with our clients, is because we've got to get that information baked into like an understanding of, a lot of times they're going to get equity in this deal. And that equity from an elemental level builds alignment and builds buy-in. Like they're committed to their practice, and now they have this, they're not on an island by themselves. I always tell them, like, look, you want as many people on the island with you because you're stronger as a tribe. And so that's one of the things I think is really good about the consolidation space, is if you pick the right partner, if they pick the right partner, and it's my job to bring those, suitors to their kissing couch and have them sit out in the lobby and, everybody file in and pitch their best case on why they should be able to go to homecoming with them. Well, you pick the right partner, it's going to be exciting because you're going to be aligned with all these other phenomenal clinicians that are around the country that you can share ideas, collaborate, and grow as a group.
So let's talk about these suitors. Who are they? Who is actually buying the aesthetic practices and the med spas, and why are they buying them?
Well, I think the more right up the middle off of right tackle buyer is the private equity firm that's in the small cap, micro cap, right? They're financial professionals that understand how to analyze the financials of a company. They oftentimes are specialized in healthcare because they really understand what drives a support for those practitioner type functional areas. And aesthetics is such a burgeoning industry. They love being at the forefront of something, at the very cutting edge. The second category of investors that I see are private wealth funds, family offices of sorts. So you might see a billionaire fund or even a couple of $100 millionaire funds that come together under two family offices and want to invest. A very core entrepreneurial spirit is the entrepreneur by acquisition. So think of a younger post-MBA individual who wants to run a business and has that energy and excitement to run it. And they go out and get some financial sponsorship, or they might take out an SBA loan. So those are the most common type of buyers that you'll see. I still see doctors that come to us and say, Bill, can you help me find a med spa in my city that I'd like to buy? And so those are probably the more one-off cases that will take on that client to help them, because it still very much aligns with our ethos of like supporting the individual doctor, supporting the individual PA, the individual nurse practitioner, the individual CRNA. That's at our core what we value supporting. And so if I get an individual doctor who's like, I want to own my own med spa, we'll sit down and talk with them too, because I think that hits the button for us of feeling good about who we're helping.
So what are they typically looking for, and what would be some things that would make them walk away from a deal?
For these savvy investors, they want to see redundant, replicable program processes. They want to know that it's not just hinging on one person who shows up every day and just makes magic happen in the back in the kitchen, and then out comes a cake. They want to know that if you're out skiing and you run into a tree and you're laid up in the hospital for several months, that the practice is going to continue to do well, right? And that comes from having overlap of modalities for energy-based devices, for lasers, for neuromodulators, for your prescriptions that you're writing, if it might be a semaglutide. They want to know that there's redundancies there. They want to know that you have a process in place. That regulatory compliance that you're paying attention to, those are the people that fetch the outsized returns. And that's what I always tell people is, you've got to inspect what you expect, right? If you expect to do well in your practice, you've got to inspect it. So you've got to know your numbers. They want people who know their numbers. They want people who know the dollars and cents behind those numbers. And they want people who know their people. That's what makes them very attractive.
So if a practice was only in business for 3 years, but they've got all of those things dialed in that are replicable, could they sell at the 3-year mark?
Absolutely. Like, I would tell them it's to their advantage too. Like, if you look at the consolidation timeline, like, this is not the end all be all. However, what I will say is that you need to look at the consolidation timeline of any healthcare industry, right? There's a great movie with Jeremy Irons. It's a Wall Street type movie. He says, you can either be first, you can be smarter, or you can cheat. And, there's somebody always smarter than us, and we don't cheat, right? And so the point of it is, be first. If you're the first, if you're in the early stages of consolidation, you are postured for much greater probabilities of multiple equity returns, right? Those liquidity events when the platform that you've joined has now multiplied out, there are not 3 or 4 or 5 practices in the organization. There's 35 or 45 or 55 practices in the organization. And that group has successfully sold to the next bigger investment firm in the cycle, the life cycle. Your shares of stock, your shares of your units in a privately held company, they're unlocking, and you're getting another multiple of cash on that value. And they're going to have you leave some on the table, and you'll roll it forward, and then you go through another cycle again for another 4 or 5, 6 years. So if you go early in the cycle, you're getting compounding multiples on that if you're picking a smart partner that's disciplined, that knows how to provide operational support for excellence, that knows how to provide back office support, and they'll build intrinsic value and organic value, and you're way better off in the earlier stages of a life cycle.
So as an owner of a practice, what would a buyer ask of me after an acquisition, typically?
I love that. That's a good question. Well done. All right, Tyler. So they're typically, most of the deals I see are multi-year requests for staying on. They want alignment. They want the face of the practice. They want the face inside the practice with the team to stay on for usually about 5 years. Sometimes a year or two less, maybe. They're willing to consider. Sometimes you stay for a year or 2 years. It's just the value of the deal changes, right? So you can have a great deal. If you're at the tail end of your practicing, whether it's 50 or 70 or 80, right? You can say like, hey, I want to be done. I want to be done in a year and a half. And I can help, my team can help structure those conversations with investors to say, this is a quality practice. You definitely want to invest in it. This is a good buy. And here's a stipulation for them. And then we help set expectations of what does that offer look like from a monetary perspective. So that's typically what I see.
So when we're talking about due diligence before the deal's done, what does it mean to do due diligence back on them as a buyer? For somebody that's listening and they don't really know about it, maybe they have a friend that went through it, but they're like, what is that? That sounds scary. What is it?
Okay, so this is something that we pride ourselves on at Aesthetic Brokers, is we provide an executive summary and a prospectus on all of the buyers that we bring to the table, and we do our homework on the buyers so that you don't have to. And we go through every single one of them and tell you about the pros and cons. And I always think of things, this goes back to my previous life, but I think of things how the CIA assesses risk, and it's never a percent, it's probability and severity, right? And so I look at risk in the deals, and I say, what's the probability of failure, and what's the severity of that failure? What's the probability of success, and what's the severity of that success? How outsized of a return can that success be, both from a cultural perspective and a financial perspective? And so when we go through that together, it's very important because you need to listen to what's important to these owners of these practices, because it's going to be different for everybody. I've never met a single deal that was the exact same. I've never met a single client that was the cookie cutter client. If you are, you're not listening hard enough as a representative for them. And so, look, we're going to sit down in person and meet. It has to happen. I got to see your practice, right? Or one of my executives has to see the practice. But we got to sit down and go to dinner and talk about what's important to you. And because then we can help with the strategy. And ultimately, I like to have management meetings where we have the investor core come in and sit down and break bread and talk to the seller and say, Tell me about you guys as people. Tell me about you all as an organization. Show me an example. Tell me an example of what you just told me that's important to you as your core values. How can you articulate that to me in an example of a deal you did? I'll tell you something that's interesting on the buy side that I found was very fascinating. Was there was a doctor who had an early onset condition that was going to impact their ability to have a steady hand, and that was extremely concerning to them, right? And one of the things that I was most proud of was the fact that that dialogue can occur between the buyer and the seller, and there were measures put in place that didn't devalue the deal at all. There were measures put in place ahead of time to check the boxes so that the doctor would be covered on their deal and the business would be covered on their deal, to have other providers come in and be a part of that. And so I think never be afraid of any aspect of your deal. I found that almost every single hurdle that you're scared about can be overcome through teamwork and candid conversation. But it's probably better to go through that conversation with somebody like us first until you get to a letter of intent, and then you tell them. Because we can help you manage that expectation. And then we'll find the buyers to come into the management meetings that you can sit down and ask the tough questions of. And that's really where the rubber meets the road for the client.
I love when you talk about breaking bread with the practice and actually getting to know them. I feel like that's a lost art these days, of remembering the importance of having somebody actually sit down with you in person, or come in and take a look at my practice, experience it firsthand as a patient.
Yeah.
And even more so, I respect so much that you care to know the practices and partner with them, before you take it to the next level and go and represent them. So that's huge.
Well, this is a year-long process for some people, right? I mean, it's a 6-month to a year process for just about anybody. So, I mean, if you're going to be in somebody's life on a weekly basis to help lift a significant load on a very important topic for them, probably the most important business topic they'll ever come across, you need to care. Like, you need to care about people's families. You need to care about people as an individual. And sometimes I'll even get told things about an individual and like what they're really like for their goals and their personal aspirations in a very, very, it's a very private setting for them, because there's something about a credible stranger that they can unload and be like, I'm really worried about this, Bill. Like, how do I make sure that I get this? Is this going to change on me? And they may not share it in front of their spouse, because they have this like load that they're trying to put on their shoulders for their family, to take care of their family. They don't want to stress them out and worry them. They're like, I'm really worried about this, Bill. How do we deal with this? And the answer is like, all right, I got your back. Like, let's talk through it and we'll come up with a strategy that works.
That's cool. I love that. And I love that they can trust you to go to you. And that's such a great point. I mean, I would probably do the same thing. I probably wouldn't share that and stress out my wife or my family. And It's great that I could, voice that to you. And then, I mean, you've been there, you've done that with so many practices, where it might even be something where, like, I can't believe you were even worried about that. That's not a big deal. We'll bring this up to the buyer. What do you think doctors who are being approached by private equity need to be aware of to protect themselves?
There are so many options that are out there. These are really, really smart individuals. Like, they're incredibly intelligent. I can't walk into an OR and do anything but watch in awe of what these individuals can do. Why would you ever walk into a boardroom and do your own deal? Like, don't do it. Like, that's my advice, is seek out a trusted advisor that you know has your best interests at heart and are aligned with you and your goals, and you will see the outsized returns. Like, for the nominal fees that you're going to pay for a quality broker, our clients see enormously outsized returns, to the tune of, I would have to go back and look, but it's probably over 30%. It's easily over 30%. Some deals again, and they become skewed. Like, wow. Given the background on that, it becomes skewed as well, because some deals, they got a horrible offer, and we'll get them like 200 times, right? Because they just didn't know what the offer should have been. Other deals, they'll get 20%. Some deals, they'll get 40, 50, 60%. But man, like, I guarantee you this, when you walk into the room with the team that I've assembled, like all of my executives have buy-side private equity healthcare experience. And that's for a reason. That's a differentiator. Our level of detail and our valuation analysis, like heavy valuation analysis background when we look at financial numbers, I feel very confident when we walk in to have a conversation that it adds credibility for the buyers, that they know that they're talking to aesthetic broker's client, in that what they're telling us is in the financials is accurate in the financials. It level sets a very safe space for people to operate and have more accurate conversations about the value that's being presented, and that creates more value as a whole for everybody.
So I want to talk about your past life. You have a very interesting background, one of the most unique that I've ever heard of, and I'm excited for you to share that with the audience here. So let's talk about before Aesthetic Brokers. What kind of work were you doing?
So I was consulting in the startup space for aerospace, and really liked analyzing companies after that, of valuing the profits and the profitability and the potential growth of a company. So people had roped me into building that up. Met a gentleman who owned a private equity firm and really connected to me and said, I want you to come and run M&A for me on a platform and DSO. And so had that exposure to the buy side. But the consulting thing with aerospace is probably what you care about, because it's more fun. Is I used to be a Marine pilot. And so when I came out of undergrad at Ohio State, I went into the Marines, and it was a great experience. The privilege to serve the country and some amazing Americans along the way.
Thank you so much for your service. I mean, first and foremost, we live in, to me, by far and away the best country in the world, the
Absolutely.
greatest country.
Absolutely.
And I'm incredibly blessed to live here, and incredibly blessed for the incredible men and women who serve and continue to serve, and those who have served. So thank you for that.
Yeah, America's worth it. Absolutely.
I love that. So let's talk about, I'm so excited to talk about this, Marine One. Tell us about that. How did you fly Marine One?
So I flew the V-22s at Marine One. I always try and clarify that for people. It was an incredible life experience. You'll hear a lot of guys and gals at the squadron say it's a series of once-in-a-lifetime opportunities packed into a short couple of years.
Wow.
It's like most other things in life. You throw your hat in the ring and see if you get to be the man in the arena, right? Is a pretty extensive application process. Your background and your performance record is reviewed scrupulously, and then you got to pass a top secret clearance, and then there's a Yankee white clearance that allows you in proximity to POTUS and VPOTUS, and it was just incredible. It was an incredible opportunity. I got to serve. You serve at the pleasure of the presidency, and it's non-political. So I served under two different administrations, and it was a privilege to do so, and everybody there is just top notch. So you get to work with the best of the best when you're at Marine One, and hats off to them.
Who are the two that you flew for?
I was there under Obama and Trump.
Wow.
So I got the full end of the spectrum, as most people are. They always want to ask about that, and I'm like, talk to me after the podcast.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
It was impressive. It was such a great experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you. First and foremost, even more so than, obviously flying POTUS and VPOTUS, it's amazing. But thank you for your service to our country. And thank you for your love for our country. That's something that I could feel from you when I first met you, is how much you love our country. And I love that.
Well, okay, so no joke. Aesthetics is very American. Like, you think about it, like, it's such an entrepreneurial, pioneer, pull yourself up from your bootstraps. So many practices that we see today were created by people who were in an environment, in maybe a hospital system that they weren't a fan of. They weren't getting treated well. This was a side gig for them that they were extremely passionate and became very knowledgeable about. And then they had the gumption to go out and start their own business and start their own thing, and then became wildly successful. That is purely American in nature, and you can't do those kind of things in other countries. Some countries you're forbidden from doing it. So I love I love the entrepreneurship, the pioneer experience that you get when you talk to these owners, and it's just cool.
So what kinds of things from your life in the military did you carry forward into this work today?
Hard work, being in the details. You've got to be humble. I think you mentioned two of your core tenets are humility and hunger. And I love those tenets. Those are very important. One of the things that, ironically, by humbling yourself through that military service, is it allows you to be a better servant to people. And that's really important. The hard work, a great work ethic will get you a long way, because somebody's always going to know more. But if you keep grinding and you keep working, you keep asking questions, and you never give up, you get better and you get better and you get better, and steel sharpens steel. And I think that credibility, ultimately, like if you're asking for one thing, it's the credibility. To be able to stand in a room full of people, look someone in the eye, tell them something, and they're like, is that person full of crap or not? I don't know, because I think a lot of people get approached some very speculative things. But I think the nice thing for us is if I show up at the dinner, people know, like, probably within about 10 minutes, they're like, okay, like, this guy is like kind of lived his life how you walk the walk, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so that's what we try and do, is treat our clients with that kind of dignity and respect.
Wow. Say what you mean what you say.
Yeah.
I mean, stand by it, live by it, be better behind closed doors, just amazing. Is there anything we didn't cover that you would like the audience to know?
Man, I mean, like, I feel like this is such a great opportunity. I'm so appreciative, Tyler, to be able to speak with you and to your audience about this stuff.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed. I've learned so much from you that pearls that I'm going to take back home. So just want to make sure I gave you a chance there.
Yeah, no, I think the things that I would say that matter for them the most are, there's a whole lot of med spa practices that are starting to open their doors in 2024 and are going to continue to open their doors in 2025. The average revenues dropped from 2022 to 2023, and that's because we had an uptick in the number of med spas. So naturally, if you're a new med spa, you're not producing as much revenue. The numbers will skew a little bit. So this industry is incredibly young from both an age perspective and from a years in business perspective. My advice is seek out counsel and advice early, and make those alliances to have the end state in mind now. That's probably the one thing I would say is, like, I can share thoughts with 1,000 people, or with one at a time. The most important theme I would extend to the thousands of people in your audience is have the end state in mind right now. If you're 55, if you're 45, if you're 35, have that end state in mind now, because the day that you think that you're going to be ready to hang them up, you got to add 5 more years, right? And I go back to the early part of the conversation again. Don't sit around thinking I'm building my empire for the next 5, 6, 7 years, and then you miss the boat. Make that an educated, informed decision now, and look, they can hit us up at our website. The phone number on the website, I purposely made mine because I want people to know that it matters at the top, and the whole team rallies behind that theme. Is it matters at the top. What matters to the client matters to me, and if I'm interested, then my team is fascinated by it.
Wow.
And so, yeah, you can reach out, you can text me, you can call me, you can put an info at the website, and I'll give more information to anybody that needs any kind of guidance or wants to bounce an opinion off of me, and happy to help.
I've never heard of the CEO putting their number at the top of the website.
Now
that is huge.
Now I'm going to get prank called by all the competition, or all the Dodgers fans out there who are like, "Oh yeah, you're a Padres fan, buddy."
Yeah, exactly. And tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so look, we love having guests on our podcast. Aesthetic Appeal is just, it's in its early stages. I love talking with people. I'm not so much the person who's like, get out there and have a heavy Instagram footprint, right? I'm the guy who's like, let me work on your deal for you.
Yeah.
But I know that it's important, and so you guys can follow us and look at us on that as well. And now that I've got some amazing support in the background that's going to help me, I'll probably be more in front of the camera and on the microphone to do some more episodes. And we're going to do a webinar series that I'm actually really more excited about, because I feel like we're providing good quality information for future clients so that they can really get some pearls to help them with their growth.
Well, Bill, I want to tell you thank you again so much for taking time out of your day to stop by and record this episode with us in San Diego, in your backyard. I'm going to say go Padres just for you.
There it is.
And
all right, Next Tech. Go Padres, Next Tech. Can I put those two together?
Yeah, exactly. And for those of you that would like to connect with Bill, all of the info to follow Bill on LinkedIn, Instagram, go and subscribe to his podcast, check out his website. Don't prank call him. That'll be in the show notes below. So thanks again, everyone. And again, thank you so much, Bill.
Thanks for listening to Aesthetically Speaking, the podcast where beauty meets business, presented by Nextech. Follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Links to the resources mentioned on this podcast are available in your show notes. For more information about Nextech, visit nextech.com, or to learn more about TouchMD, go to touchmd.com. Aesthetically Speaking is a production of The Axis, THEAXIS.io.